The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host, and today I have two of my friends and prayer partners along. I'm asking them to say hello to you and introduce themselves a little bit. So, Kim, you're the big picture on my Zoom screen. Why don't you go first?
Well, thank you, Father Nathan. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Sharp. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in San Pedro, California. And I work with people in San Pedro and virtually throughout people in LA and all over the state. And I'm here today to be on this podcast. I'm a prayer partner of Father Nathan's, and I love helping with this work. And let's see, what else? I love to sail. I go to St. Peter's Church in San Pedro, and I love to sing and dance and all kinds of other things that add some levity and joy to my life. And I'll pass it back to you, Father Nathan.
Great. And then Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil West. I hail from Maryland in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm retired. I've been so for about 11 years, happily retired. Father, I met you about a year ago at the IANS conference in Phoenix. And you took me on as a prayer partner, and we've been doing work since then. But in my extra time, I do hospice volunteer work, and I'm a death doula. So I spend a fair amount of time with people that are in the final phase of their life, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that.
And you recently went through some training. Are you finished all the death doula training, or is that still in progress?
It's all finished. I have a caseload now of about 5 different people that I see on a regular basis.
I see. All right. Well, that's another aspect of this whole end-of-life thing. And all three of us are members of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, and that's how we got acquainted at all. But today our work is to do the second part of a trilogy. There's a story that's quite extraordinary of, we're calling him A+. We first dealt with his story. He was a grandfather on a boating outing with his son and grandson, and died accidentally during the launch of a boat. If you've launched a boat before, you know you might have a trailer being pulled behind another vehicle. You back the trailer onto a sloping ramp in the water. Somebody gets on the boat, and as it's released from the trailer, then somebody's driving the vehicle to get it out of the way so the ramp is available for the next person. And in the middle is somebody that's tending to the ropes or the whatever it was that had the boat initially connected to the trailer. So there's these 3 generations of men in this one family. The dad is on the boat that's recently been launched. The granddad is fiddling with the trailer, and the grandson is in the cab of the truck driving it. But we were told that this was in the Great Lakes. It was cold. It was a day that most people wouldn't even want to go boating because of the temperature. And because of that, the windows of the cab of the truck were rolled up. It happened that the grandfather got his ankle entangled in something attached to the trailer as it was being driven away. So he was dragged not very far, but the grandson couldn't hear the shouting, and he hit his head and didn't die on the spot, but it sounded like a day or two, not very long, of medical intervention that was unsuccessful, and he died. So a very unusual story. So we told the story in last week's episode, and I've invited Phil and Kim to take part today in the compassionate response, the second part of the trilogy that we do when we do one of these. So for me, compassion means to be with in suffering. And this is just a heartbreaking story. But one of the privileges of being involved in this work is it doesn't matter how awful the death was. We get to be a part of a resurrection story or something. We're all Christians of different kinds. And it has this movement from Good Friday to Easter morning is the way I like to think of it. Regardless of how the story played out, we get to be a part of seeing someone go on to better things. So with that, I've kind of teed it up. So we're talking about compassionate response. Would one of you like to get us started?
So when I think about compassionate response in relation to the story, I think about how A+, when he first arrived, was just really pretty hard on himself and felt a lot of guilt for what happened. And also felt a little bit powerless in terms of knowing how much his son and grandson were suffering because they felt so guilty about what happened because they thought it was their fault. And one of the things that I noticed, it's true with this story as with other stories, that when he really acknowledged the truth of it, like, well, it was a mistake, and it was an accident, and it really was what it was, that he was able to move on and be ready for the next plane of existence, the next level of heaven. But yeah.
Well, he felt bad that he knew his son and grandson felt responsible for his death, and they were grieving not just his death, but some idea of them being complicit in causing it or something like that. And he said, that's really beyond my reach. I can't get to them and change their minds about that, but he did say that he had his own choice to make about that sort of thing. And he said that he was pretty good throughout his life. He was very strong on saying what a happy life he led. Do you remember that? He spoke at length about his happy marriage, his small town life and engagement with, I think, Kiwanis and church life and, civic small town stuff. And he went on about just having such a happy life that ended in this tragic way, but that he didn't want to let that moment at the end change everything. So, Phil, how about you? You got something to contribute?
Yeah, you two have covered a lot of what struck me. So I would add that there was regret and feelings of guilt on both sides. The survivors of A+ were second guessing. Could they have done something differently to change the outcome? And then A+ was feeling similar feelings of guilt and regret. In the end, it was an accident, and the realization that it was an accident and things do happen was a help in releasing the sadness that A+ was holding on to and opening the door to allow him to go to the next level and enjoy more joyful experiences.
I have the transcript of the initial conversation that we had when we were helping him cross, and he mentioned that he wanted to leave a legacy of joy, that he was an old man, and he said, I would have died of something maybe in the not too distant future because of my advanced age. I happened to die this way, but he said I was someone who was used to like putting one foot in front of another, doing whatever the next thing in front of you is, and that was the way that he felt he really needed to deal with this event, that it was, obviously tragic. He kicked himself a little bit about, he said, I was the one who was inattentive. I was the one that let my ankle get entangled in something that ended up dragging me. I said that wasn't anybody's fault but my own. But then he didn't go on about that either. He said, I didn't want to make too much of that. It was a simple mistake. It just had the consequence that it had. Um, and then he also said that afterwards, the care that he got in his initial afterlife level was therapeutic because he needed it. He needed to be cared for a bit, and um, that he needed to both grieve his death and the impact it was having on his son and grandson, and he said, and to get on with things. I like that because of this work and the podcast, I get some contact from people who are grieving, and that's the way it is for a lot of folks, that there's something in their grief that has regrets or what ifs, and if only, or sometimes it's, that a death occurred so abruptly that there weren't last words or something. So there can be some sort of regrets. And then at the same time, a lot of people know that I don't want to stay miserable, and I don't think my loved one would want me to be. So I need to somehow grieve and get on with it.
Yeah, he did make a point of that. That he was raised to. We all experience adversity, but he was raised to say, "Okay, that's happened. Now let's just move on." And he had even in telling his story, he had a lightheartedness about him.
Absolutely.
And that made it a real joy to chat with him. And at one point he said, well, I've joined up with what he called the Weird Club of Strange Death.
I forgot that.
Which apparently there's a group of folks that have had very unusual ways of transitioning into the afterlife. And so he was somewhat delighted to be able to hear other people's stories and share his own.
Yeah, can you imagine people sitting in a circle, listening to each other's weird death story and then saying, oh, you think that's weird? I can top that. And everybody having a laugh about the weird way in which they died. To me, that might sound morbid or just too peculiar, but I've been a Christian all my life, and I've understood that it takes all the nerve in the world to call Good Friday good, but we do that. Because we don't just pay attention to the awfulness of what attends the specific cause of death, but we know that we survive it however it comes, and there's always the next day. Welcome back, Kim. Kim left us through, I don't know, internet connection or something.
Internet connectivity, yeah.
Yes, yeah. You're back with us. So we've been talking a little bit about the lightheartedness that A+ had, and that he was determined even now to leave a legacy of joy about his life. He went on at length about how happy his life was and how grateful he was for the love of his family and so on. And so that's kind of where we were when you left us briefly. Do you have something to contribute?
Yeah, I remember that part of the story and how he was able to really add levity to the story, and just sort of, it was a healing element, and I think helping him move on. And I think I said, hopefully that levity that you had in your life could contribute to the healing of, your son and grandson as well.
Right. Yeah. One thing he ended up saying after talking about, the peculiar details of what happened as he was dragged, and talking about the fact that after his death, that all three of them had different kinds of guilt feelings and kind of what ifs and so on. In the end, he just said, do you really need to place blame? And I thought that kind of jumped off the page to me, because there can be people who are grieving with what I call dirt in the wound. You know, grief is difficult, but sometimes it's made more difficult by having dirt in the wound, blaming oneself when it's not really necessary, that kind of thing, or even being angry at the person who left abruptly. And anyway, you must deal with that as a counselor, that sometimes people will have a life circumstance that would be challenging for anybody, but something about the way they think about it or process it makes it even harder than it has to be. Do you find that true?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's especially when there's one hurt upon hurt. Like if a person deals with like multiple losses in a short amount of time, or big losses that no one should have to ever experience. There can be where's the fairness in all of that? Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes I think I've experienced people who will seek help from me, but then what they really end up doing is kind of trying to prove to me why their deep sadness is so legitimate. They'll kind of stack up all the bad things that have happened to them and build a little tower out of it. And it seems like they're trying to say, no wonder I'm so miserable, because if you'd been through all the things I've been through, you'd be miserable too. And then I have to say, well, I understand that to be true. That's awful. Would you like any help moving from misery to something different? Because commiseration, being within misery, is really not my strong suit. If you need somebody to be with you in that, I'm probably not the guy for the job.
I've heard you say that. Yeah, go ahead, tell.
He also touched on the idea that when tragedy strikes, people search for a rationalization. And one of the things that might happen is you look to God, or the will of God is what he touched on, and said, well, maybe this was destined to be. Maybe this was God's will to have this outcome. But then he went on to say that at least in his circumstance and in everything that he's seen while being in the afterlife, that didn't apply. So at least in his case, or at least in the experiences that he's had, the will of God didn't openly or directly enter into the picture. What happened was an accident. It was an unfortunate sequence of events that led to him joining the weird club of strange death, and that's about the extent of it.
That is a sensitive topic for me, because you remember 30 years ago, at the beginning of my first Afterlife Interrupted book, there was Ray, whose first words were, "Who the hell does he think he is taking me just when my life's getting good?" That he had burned to death and had been taught prior to that when people die, it's because God takes them. Well, that was a really toxic religious idea that really had him all bound up. So, yeah, that idea that somehow this is God's plan, that you got dragged to death behind a trailer. No, please don't do that. That's an example of dirt in the wound, making a bad thing even harder to endure. I want to talk a little bit about what happened near the end of that session when it was time for him to move. Do you remember that part? His brother-in-law, Mitch?
Yeah. His brother-in-law, Mitch, he said that his sister married someone that he could not have asked for, basically a better brother-in-law. And then when that brother-in-law passed away of cancer, he grieved almost as much as his sister did. And that's who wanted to have him join because he was so fond of him.
Yes. In fact, he said, my sister did such a good job of choosing a husband that he said, you know how people will say at a toast at a wedding reception that I'm, not losing a daughter, I'm gaining a son, that kind of thing. He said, if she hadn't married him, I would have. And then he quickly explained, now, I wasn't homosexual. And Kim, you respond to him, I understand. It's just, he loved this man from the outset. And then he said that both of these couples lived long, happy marriages in the same town and were engaged. And he said, we were attractive to other people because we just had happy, orderly lives.
Yeah.
Other people wanted to be around us because we were just wholesome. We were good people living well-ordered, happy lives without a lot of drama.
And I think he touched on that in the context. He touched on Mitch's situation in the context of something like, look, I died relatively quickly. I went to the hospital. I declined over a couple of day period, and it was over and done with. Mitch had a protracted illness.
Yes.
Was difficult to witness. So A+ felt, he said, I feel fortunate that my situation turned out the way that it did, having watched Mitch's case. It's Mitch was a model or an example to him about going through something tough. And he looked up to him, I think, for that. So it was nice that Mitch showed up in the transition, in the crossing.
And A+ mentioned, he said, my sister is still upon the earth. And I believe there's a song about the circle being unbroken by and by, Lord in the sky. You know that song? That he really did know now that it's true, that eventually there'll be reunions with everybody when the time comes, that the circle will be unbroken. And then he, when it was time, we get still to see who's going to come. And he wasn't sure who it was, but it turned out to be Mitch. And then I just love this part. He said, all right, Mitch is going to have some fun with this. He's pretending he's at the rodeo. Do you remember that?
Yes, the lasso.
He's got this lariat and he's laughing that he's going to rope me and drag me from place to place. If he tries to do that, I'll smack him. Remember that?
Yes.
Can you, I don't know, people that are watching or listening to this, can you really imagine that people do that after they die? Well, I can imagine it because I've witnessed it. People can have fun with it, and they do. And he said, of course, he didn't do that, but he threatened. And so I threatened I'd smack him. And then he mentioned that Mitch had one of the original Thunderbirds. He said when they were small and sporty. And it ran sometimes and other times it didn't. But even when it didn't, we might go over visit it in the detached garage across his yard where he kept it. But now it's up and running and it's good as new. He's just saying, get in and we'll go for a little spin. So even the crossing there at the end was, I think, lighthearted and fun. And it was two guys who loved each other who now are together, presumably on their way to other misadventures until the rest of their family joins them.
When we went back for permission, we touched on that thought again. And I think I said, well, you must be doing all kinds of interesting things now, playing golf or whatever your earthly passions were. And his first response was, well, it's eternity after all, so I'm in no rush.
Yeah, that's true. He hadn't really decided on some grand plan. He was just kind of being and enjoying the moment, something like that. Well, when we got all the way to the end, I always end it with what Catholics call the Glory Be, or what Protestants often call a doxology. Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. And Kim, what you said is, what a lovely story. And it was a
Really
lovely
was.
story. Mhm.
Yeah. It was just a great story because, again, he was able to take what happened to him and eventually have a laugh about it.
Mhm.
And he also acknowledged, like, I was an old man. I was probably going to die in a few years anyway. And this just sort of, like, he was able to take the ultimate lemon and turn it into lemonade.
Absolutely.
It's just like, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But his humor was great. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's an inspiring story in the end, or what you called a lovely story. So I think we'll leave that there for this episode, and you're going to stay on with me, and we're going to create the next episode, which will be the third part of the trilogy, which we call a spiritual practice that might arise from this story. But for now, I'm going to sign off this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast and remind you that if you would like to be in touch with me or with Kim or Phil, you can do that through my website. I would make sure that they get the message. I just ask that if you're new to what we do, that you read one of the Afterlife Interrupted books first before trying to arrange a time or to talk. Just, I think that my experience is we have a better engagement with each other if you're a little more familiar with what we do. And remember that I pray for you a lot. And when I do, I'm most interested in your insights. Like Kim, as a counselor, was trying to help figure out what inside you, where there might be some key at the lock that could help you live in joy or in joyful hope. I pray that the Holy Spirit inside you would find the place where there's the origin of whatever it is that might steal your joy, that somehow something inside could shift or move, or sometimes I think of highlight and delete. If there was only some little thing or some little thought or some way of perceiving of a thing that could change, that might send you in a happier direction. That's my prayer. So that's it for this episode. I hope you'll join us next time for our next episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. God bless you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless. Have you ever had to do something so difficult that you had to deal with it in stages? Imagine dying suddenly with no forewarning. Being in a car crash, a shooting, a drowning. You leave your body, but then what? How do you transition into the afterlife? For some, it flows all at once, but not for everybody. For some, the process of transitioning into the afterlife is interrupted. Maybe there's a need for rest or for learning, or maybe just the chance to adjust to such an abrupt experience. I'm Father Nathan Castle. I'm a Catholic priest. About 23 years ago, the Holy Spirit began to send me people who had died traumatically. They entered my dreams during sleep, showing me what had happened to them and asking for help. They had died and moved on, sort of, but they'd come to a moment where it was time to complete the crossing. With the help of the angels and saints and earthly prayer partners, we've assisted more than 300 souls as they complete their crossing. You can read about it in my book series. Afterlife Interrupted books are available on Amazon. You can also learn more by visiting my website, nathan-castle.com. God bless you.